Today's talk focuses on three general areas. The first is we revisit with our good friend Bob Lutz for some new insight into arguments made by him about Tesla, mostly on the negative side. The second thing we review is where are we with the Tesla stock, given we're about to hear what the actual earnings are and get a good look at what the numbers look like. The third thing we end up doing today is the first in a series that I'll call Parking Lot Pimpin'. And what that means is that on our Teslafaninsight at Facebook, on a weekly or every couple of week basis, we have sort of photos of our local service facility so you can actually look at how many cars are out there and then determine your sense of where we are on sales and how the company's doing. And we also try to include insights that we may have beyond that. But I think it's a worthwhile effort, and at this point we only have 50 people subscribing on Facebook, but I thought that it'd be useful to include this in our show as well, even though they're fixed images rather than moving ones. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. Wanted to thank all of our Patreon supporters. Your support makes a huge difference in terms of quality of execution of our show, and it's appreciated. Please also note subscriptions help. We do have typically 3 ads in our show and would appreciate you watching at least 10 seconds of that to support the ability of the channel to continue to produce quality journalism. Today's show, so we've been tracking Bob Lutz and his comments regarding Tesla for a couple of years now, and on a quarterly basis after announcement of earnings, it's typically the situation that CNBC will roll Bob Lutz out and sort of get a sense for his take on where Tesla is given the new information that's been provided. And I thought it was interesting because there were some really interesting points he revealed in his last show that answered a few mystery questions that explained what GM and the Bolt are up to. And I was impressed that he took time to share, hence why we want to include this. And so the first in probably 5 points that he made was that, as you all know, the Bolt was being sold for $35,000, in essence $10,000 below what the realistic price of the car should be. And the question was, why were they doing that? The answer is a concept called a loss leader. So the theory behind that was that GM felt that if they could offer a car, let's say $10,000 to $20,000 lower than what Tesla was selling, they would draw a lot of Tesla customers away and therefore potentially make it difficult, if not impossible, for Tesla to stay in business. What obviously we saw happen was that people were paying as much as $20,000 more than the GM vehicle to get a Tesla, and they were happy to do so. So the whole effort that GM was making to sort of underprice Tesla with the Chevy Bolt didn't really work out. And so Mr. Lutz further went on to explain that the logic behind how this price lowering process worked is that, one, there are EV credits or tax credits related to the amount of non-polluting vehicles you have available. So this is a bonus. The second issue was that places like GM and Ford could afford to take profits that they're making on expensive polluting vehicles and use that as a method to be able to provide loss leaders in other vehicles where they could, in essence, take losses, and it's no big deal because they're making so much on polluting large SUVs, etc. So the issue that came up with is how much could they afford to do this? And it was interesting that they chose to do a $10,000 discount rather than maybe a $20,000 discount to see whether or not they could draw more folks that way. The other thing that GM did in this process was limit the number of vehicles that they would sell, and therefore they could sort of anticipate how big the loss might be. So I thought this was really interesting because in Europe, there was actually a 3,000 car backlog for the Bolt equivalent, and Chevrolet was not bringing that car to Europe, even though there are a large number of buyers that were interested, even at, I think, the higher price point. So it definitely answers a mystery that I had as to how and why this might work. There are other comments that have been made numerous times by Mr. Lutz. Among them I always found interesting is the fact that there's nothing in Tesla's battery capabilities that's better than other companies. And he may be right in this regard, but as we all know, if you do some research, you'll find out that really Tesla is the only 300-mile plus vehicle available across a number of brands that are out there. And so therefore, the battery not as good argument that he's making may be the case, but if that's the case, why is it that all the competitors entering the market space are unable to offer comparable range to what Tesla's offering, as well as comparable performance? The next part of his argument that I wanted to look at is a discussion he's had about the fact that GM is about to bring out 22 different models, as well as if you look at what's coming from the VWs and Daimlers of the world, there are a large number of models that are on the way, and therefore Tesla would lose out based on these new models entering. I thought this was an interesting argument that he made because if you look at what happened with the Bolt, and then you look at the performance parameters of the Model S, Model 3, and then vehicles like the Taycan, it's clear that manufacturers are now introducing products with 150, maybe 200 miles of range, and they suffer several disadvantages. Number one, performance. We can see the performance numbers being, 20% worse than Tesla in many cases. The range is also, in the 250 range is the high end of what competitors are coming to market with right now, whereas Tesla is solidly at 300 miles or above. And by the way, the 250 range in many cases are ranges that have been articulated to exist by the manufacturers, but nobody's actually tested it out to see if this is the case. The initial range claims were 300 miles, then it was reduced to, let's say, 238 for the new Jaguar I-Pace, as well as for the Audi. Most, if not all, of these companies are using an LG battery, and so one would think that the battery range capabilities of these vehicles pretty much fit the same parameters. And again, as we all know, consumers are of the opinion that if you offer 300 miles of range or more, you have about 75% of the population willing to do it. At 100 miles, 25% of the population is willing to do it. So the around 200-mile range of these vehicles kind of hits at the midpoint, and one doesn't know if people are willing to spend $70,000 to $100,000 for a vehicle with basically limited range in the 200 to 225-mile range in reality. So that's a lot of money to spend for a relatively short distance in those vehicles. So so bottom line is that the Bob Lutz arguments in this case, I think there's more clarity to it. The fact that there's an attempt at loss leader was a good one, and it kind of hasn't worked out. What's also happening now, and I think is fascinating, is the fact that the loss leader technique being used by competitors as the Model 3 enters more markets, they have to deal with a global competitor. So if they're going to try to take losses, they have to do so across several markets rather than just the United States. So I just think that we're exiting the period where the way Tesla might lose or go out of business is related to this loss leader strategy, because you now have to deal with them making money across the globe, and your products have to be competitive across all those locations to not get sort of put in the tank. So fascinating situation. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out over time. The second thing we wanted to cover today is kind of what's going on with the stock price, etc. As you know, Tesla has fallen below $300 a share now. We're the 25th of January 2019. The downgrades and the stock of the price are reflective of Elon's announcement that they're barely going to make a profit this quarter. And as we watch the stock price swing, the closer it gets to 250, it's a suggestion that they won't meet their bond obligations in March in terms of cash needed. And as it starts to float back to 300, it seems like those fears disappear about some kind of a bankruptcy restructuring being in order. So our take on this is that Elon and company has plenty of cash to work with and therefore able to meet the obligations coming in March. But the problem is that it does suck up a lot of cash that might be used for further growth. So I think it trims the growth rate a little bit of the company as they don't meet the $360 stock price that allows them to do cash and stock in addressing the March, in essence, capital call that they have for $920 million. So I think this is unfortunate. Also, I'm a little bit surprised myself because we kind of kept an eye on what was going on in our local facilities at Tesla. And the suggestion there was that all the vehicles that were there were already sold and we're really waiting on customers to pick them up based on paperwork, et cetera. And we were a little surprised to see a full service facility after the dust cleared. So our take on where we are right now is that companies fine, stocks fine. We don't get huge numbers of updraft unless we see upside surprises from sales in Europe or China. And I think that's unfortunate that we don't have a blockbuster going on right now. It's great that the company is solidly able to stay in business and in the black and hopefully doesn't have to raise cash but can still grow. So we'll keep an eye on it, update. If you choose to do anything with options, a straddle is probably in order and is going to be a big time movement in the stock price as we head into the next earnings announcement because a lot of folks are waiting on what those numbers are going to look like. The next thing that we wanted to get into, which is a little bit unusual for us, is something I call parking lot pimping. On a regular basis, we visit our local service facility. We take pictures, sometimes video, of what the whole lot looks like. And as I'm speaking today, I've decided to go ahead and just include images of what the Tysons Corner facility looks like. Based on sort of historically what this space has looked like over the last year, we would say that there's an overabundance of Model X's, S's, or Model X's, Model 3s, and a few S's as well for sale. Am I surprised? Because there was such a push to get cars out prior to the end of last year, I guess I'm not really surprised to see a residue of cars not purchased or purchases completed that are sitting on the lot. I am surprised if you'll notice the red tags, those are all repair vehicles. And I guess I was a little surprised because the number of repair vehicles is like double what's normal. But there are a lot of for sale vehicles also available. So kind of an interesting circumstance. I would say that the argument one could make is that, this is good, not great news for Tesla to have all these vehicles sitting around unsold. And we're looking forward to it being not the case soon. Organs. So hence you can see people with type 2 diabetes that don't seem to be visibly overweight because where the weight is being stored is internal near those organs related to the type of eating that's been done. So I wanted to remind you guys of this because I think it's an important item to note in terms of good, healthy process. At any rate, about to do my 20 leg lifts and get a half-hour walk-in. Wanted to thank all of you for taking time out to join us. Please take time to like and subscribe if you would. And any and all comments are appreciated. We are Teslafaninsight, so we're not big negative on Tesla. If that's your agenda, we think it's a great company that can make a huge difference for all of us. At any rate, again, thank you for joining us. Tschüss German, au revoir French, lehitrahot, Hebrew, Hoda Hafez, Farsi. Enough respect in Jamaica is what we say. And walk good, man. Have a great day. Thanks for joining us, and bye for now. So in general, we would say that Tesla is in a strong position, but not as strong as we had hoped at this point. And we look forward to how European and other sales will help boost the company going forward. So this sort of completes our usual coverage of Tesla. And I wanted to move into my final area, which is we typically have health tips that we'll make based on having conversations with different types of doctors. So I've been kind of wrestling with a conversation I had with a doctor whose specialty is kidneys. And basically what he pointed out is there's a huge problem, at least in the United States, and that relates to the fact that you have large numbers of people who are eating fried foods as well as high fructose corn syrup and other products, that are sort of newfangled. What he pointed out is the human body's been around for thousands of years, and all of these newfangled items are hard on the body because there's a degree to which the body doesn't know how to process. So when it doesn't know how to process those newfangled food, including fried, it simply stores that around the major organs. So hence you can see people with type 2 diabetes that don't seem to be visibly overweight, because where the weight is being stored is internal near those organs related to the type of eating that's been done. So I wanted to remind you guys of this because I think it's an important item to note in terms of good, healthy process. At any rate, about to do my 20 leg lifts and get a half-hour walk-in. Wanted to thank all of you for taking time out to join us. Please take time to like and subscribe if you would. And any and all comments are appreciated. We are Teslafaninsight, so we're not big negative on Tesla. If that's your agenda, we think it's a great company that can make a huge difference for all of us. At any rate, again, thank you for joining us. Tschüss German, au revoir French, lehitrahout, Hebrew, Hoda Hafez, Farsi. Enough respect in Jamaica is what we say. And walk good, man. Have a great day. Thanks for joining us, and bye for now. So in general, we would say that Tesla is in a strong position, but not as strong as we had hoped at this point. And we look forward to how European and other sales will help boost the company going forward. So this sort of completes our usual coverage of Tesla. And I wanted to move into my final area, which is we typically have health tips that we'll make based on having conversations with different types of doctors. So I've been kind of wrestling with a conversation I had with a doctor whose specialty is kidneys. And basically what he pointed out is there's a huge problem, at least in the United States, and that relates to the fact that you have large numbers of people who are eating fried foods as well as high fructose corn syrup and other products, that are sort of newfangled. What he pointed out is the human body's been around for thousands of years, and